Am I the a-hole for not wanting my husband's mom at our wedding? Original story. For context, my husband and I got married in a courthouse 2 years ago. I told my husband to tell his family, but he didn't want to since his family wasn't my biggest fan. His family can be extremely judgmental and have said they didn't like me or my character because I grew up in a place completely opposite of where they're from. Every time I had met with his family, some type of drama would unfold. For example, his mom accused me of touching his brother's leg inappropriately at his grandfather's funeral. I slapped his knee because he told me a joke I thought was funny. I chalked it up to the fact she just lost her dad. She didn't like me, so she needed someone to take some type of anger out on. I put up with a lot more than that for my husband, since I never wanted to be the type of person to ask him to choose. 5 months ago, I had our second child. When I had found out I was pregnant, my husband and I were going through a rough patch. We almost divorced because of a lot of things, his mother being one of them. We decided to really work on our marriage, and we've been amazing ever since. The best we've ever been. During my pregnancy, his mother and I got really close. I'd like to say I'm a really forgiving person and try to see the best in everyone. Also, it was making my husband happy. She even came down to stay with us when I had the baby. Fast forward a month later, she called my husband and said her and his dad would love to come and visit since his dad had yet to meet the baby. I thought the visit went well, but while my husband had went outside to get my toddler's car seat from their rental car, my father-in-law told my husband he needs to swab his mouth to make sure the baby was his. My husband, of course, got angry and asked my father-in-law if that was the reason they came to visit. My mother-in-law ran outside because she heard them fighting and told my husband it was nothing like that everyone in the family was swabbing their mouths because they were doing a 23 and me. She said that my Sil and Bael had done it, so they wanted him to do it too. He declined doing one, and we left it at that. A month after the visit, my mother-in-law called my husband and said she needed to speak with him privately. He went outside for an hour to speak with his mother, and he came back inside visibly upset. He pulled me to my room privately and informed me that my mother-in-law and father-in-law had swabbed both my newborn's mouth and my toddler's mouth when they had visited. They said that my toddler came back 99.99% related to them, but my newborn only came back 11% related to them. So they felt the need to tell my husband so he could get my newborn DNA tested. I was confused and angry. I had also just found out my brother had a brain tumor as well, so there had already been a lot going on for me emotionally. When my husband and I separated, I had not slept with anyone else since our relationship was so rocky. I didn't want to do anything more to jeopardize losing him, so I wasn't understanding why she felt the need to take a DNA test into her own hands, especially since it wasn't a concern of my husband's. Ever since my husband was told of the DNA test, him and his mother would not stop fighting for a number of reasons. I no longer trusted her with my children, and I no longer wanted her around, and she couldn't understand that. We decided to get a DNA test on our newborn, so we can shove the results in her face and we could move on with our lives. Of course, the test came back 99.999% my husband's, and she thought we could just pretend it didn't happen, but the damage was done. That brings us to today. We set boundaries with mother-in-law and father-in-law. They can no longer video chat the children every day like before. Our daughter is not allowed to go over mother-in-law's alone, and we no longer update them about things going on in our lives. We've kept them at a distance, and it's working for us. Recently, my husband and I started marriage classes so we could redo our wedding with our families included. My family knows the whole situation with mother-in-law, and I'm also not her biggest fan, so I told my husband I do not feel comfortable inviting them to our wedding. My husband was obviously upset, but understood. We have sent out our save the dates to everyone in his family, but mother-in-law and father-in-law. There has been nothing but drama since. I'm putting my foot down on the situation and still strong on the decision that I do not want them to come. But my husband is stressed because they're involving everyone in his family in our drama. Should I just give in for his sake and invite them? Should I stand my ground and still say no? Am I the a-hole if I don't invite them? Edit. I just want to clarify a few things. My husband told his mom we got married an hour after we said I do. He was hesitant to tell his mother-in-law because 1, she wasn't my biggest fan, and 2, she wants all her children to get married in a church. So the first words out of her mouth were, "You guys aren't actually married," and "It is now, that is not your wife," whenever they're arguing because she's drunk. Also, my husband is the one who wants this wedding. I was reluctant, and I personally thought a party was enough, but he does want us to get married in a church. So after I thought about it, and I figured things out with myself religiously, I agreed. And to answer the question most asked, she has not apologized. She has called me to talk out the situation, and I explained to her I understood her doubt. I also explained to her that it made no sense to me why she couldn't just ask me for the test since her and I were in such a good spot. I would have done it willingly. Her apology went along the lines of, "I'm not going to apologize because I believe what I did was right to protect mine." And when I informed her we were taking some space, her response was, "I don't understand because I've disrespected you so much in the past. Why is now different?" So for those saying they're all for second chances, I've given her 1,000,000. I've spoke with my husband about the situation, and he said that he is fine with either. He is fine with them not being there, and he is fine with them being there under certain conditions. Now for the update. Hello all. It has been a month since my initial post, and I thought I'd update some on the situation. Firstly, I would like to thank all that have provided me with beneficial advice, a lot of which did not fall on deaf ears. So thank you guys. So after careful consideration, I've decided that if my mother-in-law would like to attend the wedding, and if my husband would like to invite her, then so be it. I would not like to be the bad guy, nor would I like my husband to resent me in the future for not allowing his mother to attend. A lot of people said it is just not the hill to die on, and I agree. My mother-in-law did come to visit this past weekend. I decided to stay home since I would like to protect my mental health, and I felt nothing good would come from me meeting with her. My husband, however, had multiple conversations with her in regards to the issue. She stated that my decision to limit her visitation and communication with the kids was out of spite, and that she did apologize, so it was up to me to accept it. In other words, take it or leave it. Here comes the good part. She has decided that when her lease is up in March, she will be moving closer to us, same city, so she could help us out whenever we need it. My husband informed her it was not a good idea and that a conversation between her and I would need to happen beforehand. I informed him I have no interest in speaking with her because she is set on the idea that she did nothing wrong. I did not want her to come down here. And now I feel like I'm distancing myself from my husband because I am trying to avoid the inevitable, which would be him taking her side like he did in the past. Granted, a lot of changes have happened, but I think the whole situation brings up past emotions for me. To think of her closer to us makes me want to vomit. My husband said something when returning from his meeting with her that was along the lines of, "She said she apologized. Did she?" When I had told him no prior. He did the same exact thing when his mom called me a slut in front of his whole family, same verbiage. She said she didn't say that, did she? So that's why it is, bring up all of these past emotions, and that is why I am saying it is inevitable. I really don't know what to do. I love my husband, but at the same time I value my own mental health, so I do not have the energy to fight this fight again. Story 2. My dad stole my college scholarship money and threatened to kill himself because I was angry. I said, "Go ahead." Original story. For context, I am currently a college freshman. I am on a full ride to my university. Every semester, I get a check sent to my house to pay off my housing costs, which is about $9. My unemployed father got evicted from my old address because he wasn't paying rent, so my family started living in a hotel. I was questioning how they were paying for the hotel, considering it was $150 a night. Turns out, my father used my college check to cash out and pay for the hotel for 2 months. I begged him to pay off my college housing costs for 2 months straight. He lied to me, telling me that it was attached to some funds, which were hard to get out, Very confusing, but keep in mind, I have absolutely zero financial literacy, and my father never went into depth. I brushed it off, hoping that everything would work for the best. My college housing gave my father a deadline to pay off housing costs, November 1st. I was stressed for 2 months, unable to eat well, sleep, socialize, etc. If my dad doesn't pay it off, I may or may not have to drop out. When the deadline hit, I called my dad and asked him why he hadn't paid off my housing costs. He finally revealed that he used the check on the hotel we were living in. I was furious, and I started interrogating him like a prosecutor. He blamed the family for being responsible for using my college money, not himself, and also blamed me. He lent me allowance money for 2 months, telling me that it was from my relatives when it was actually from my $900 housing check. I asked him why he would do this, and he said that he didn't want to stress me out. I cried, telling him I worked way too hard in high school for me to drop out. I said that he owed me an apology 3 times over the phone, but he refused because he thought he had done nothing wrong since he was providing for the family. I asked him again, and he said sorry in a mocking voice. I told him that he was full of shit, and he started saying that he wants to put a gun to his head and kill himself, and it will all be on me. This is not the first time he has done that. I told him to do it, and I hung up. My mom called me, and I informed her about the situation. She told me to apologize to my dad, and I told her, as psychotic as I may sound, I have no remorse, especially after what he did. My mom threatened to disown me, but I somehow mended things with them for 3 weeks. It is currently Thanksgiving break, and my father still didn't pay off my check, and he said that he would get money Saturday to pay it off. My mom told me again to apologize to him after he paid my housing costs, and I said I would avoid conflict. But I think I'm way too stubborn to apologize, especially because I genuinely think I have nothing to be sorry for. My dad never fully apologized and made a joke out of me to the family. Now for the updates. First and foremost, immediately after this happened, I managed to get a separate debit card without my parents knowing. I don't have a job now, but I'm looking to get one later on in the semester. I didn't go to the financial aid center because my dad somehow managed to pay me back. I'm going under the assumption that it's through my grandmother's Social Security checks. Last December, after weeks of calling my father to make up for my scholarship money and pay me back, he finally sent me a check for $9,000. The check came in my dorm mail around midnight. I was asleep by then, and my dad was spam calling my phone to tell me it was in the mail. I didn't call him back until 1 in the afternoon because I had an exam that day. He started cursing at me, telling me how he couldn't sleep all night because I didn't answer my phone. I talked back and said, "The stress you put me through for 3 months by lying about my scholarship check is nothing compared to the stress you went through for a day." He started insulting me in every way possible, telling me that I was spoiled. I swore back, saying, "Are you serious?" And he hung up. Moments later, my dad made my mom call me because he didn't want to argue with me. She screamed at me, saying that I should always have respect for him as a father and that I should apologize for swearing. I said that yes, I did swear at him, but he did too, calling me a bunch of slurs and whatnot. She also accused me of purposely ignoring them when I made it clear several times that I was asleep and I had an exam at 9 in the morning, hence not calling them at midnight. I told her that we shouldn't even have this talk because he was clearly in the wrong in this entire situation, and every other kid would have gone to the financial aid center, and my dad would have gotten in trouble. My mom misunderstood me for saying that I was going to report my dad. She had a mental breakdown and hung up. Moments later, my dad called and told me to go ahead and report him because I would be going to jail instead of him because he sent me some of the money from the check, which is bullshit. I called him out on his bullshit, and he said that he was permanently severing ties so I could learn my lesson. He hung up. I didn't call them for a week until I realized that I didn't have a place to stay for winter break. My dorm closed. I swallowed my pride and called them back to apologize. They said they'll accept me back to the family. This honestly still keeps me up at night. but I literally didn't have a choice but to stay with them over break. Over break, they've noticed that I'm way more cold and distant towards them, and they still wonder why. Luckily, I got the 9K check from my university to pay for this semester's housing fees. The best thing that came out of this is that I ended up reconnecting with my estranged sister, F25. Long story short, my father financially abused my sister for years, maxing out her credit cards and leaving her 20K in debt. They cut all ties a year ago after my sister started dating a guy they didn't approve of. When I was on good terms with them, they painted her as the bad guy, telling me that she betrayed them by choosing her boyfriend over the entire family. I also didn't know that my dad financially abused her. Turns out, she was in the same situation I was in and ended up dropping out because my dad didn't let her take out a student loan. I talked to my sister, and she said that she was honestly glad that she severed ties with them because she's finally financially independent, even if she's not financially stable. We're closer than ever, and I probably consider her as a shoulder to lean on. Mentally, I'm really not doing well. I'm generally stoic, but this is taking a hard emotional toll on me because my family was my world. Before college, I always knew my father was insane, but my mother was my ride or die. I told her everything. I helped her through her marital problems. She told me everything. And the fact that she chose my abusive, unemployed father, the man that she always talked about wanting to divorce, over her daughter is heartbreaking. She still expects me to be her armchair therapist, and she told me she wants me to act like how I did before. I told her over break that no matter what she does, she will never mend back the trust I had for her then. And my father, despite his flaws, I never expected him to use my check. He put such a huge emphasis on education and told me he wanted me to have the life he never had. And knowing he would sacrifice my education just so he could live in a fancy $150 hotel is very disheartening. Recently, I've been very isolated. I still talk to a few people. My grades are falling, and I haven't been eating or sleeping well. Maybe this situation should be a wake-up call for me, but I've come to the point where I'm completely apathetic about everything. I refrain from drugs, thankfully, but even so, I feel like my life is on autopilot. Final update. My dad stole my college scholarship money months ago. Now he's not getting a single penny from me. As you may or may not know, I made 2 posts several months ago about my father using up my college money. I also want to clear up some confusion about the posts. My parents are religiously married through the Catholic Church in another country, but they never got legally married because my dad doesn't want my mother to get a green card. And yes, in some colleges like mine, the broken education system in America still use checks, but most people use direct deposit. I am glad to say that he no longer has access to my finances, and I am in low contact with them. Thanks to the advice of this subreddit, I got my social security card and other documents months before I left for college. I also managed to get my first job. I distanced myself from my parents, and I took a lot of time to reflect on them and their actions. They also distanced themselves from me after I finally put my foot down and refused to give them financial assistance. They said that I was self-absorbed, and once again, my father told me he would kill himself if I didn't help him. And this time, instead of telling him to off himself, I told him that's a decision he would make, and I can't be responsible for it. I realized no matter what I do, they'll never change. They will always be the type of people to financially leech off of others, using their suicide threats and weaponizing self-pity, but they're too emotionally stunted to see the faults of that. Their psyche is so twisted, and I spent a lot of time mourning for the parents I never had. They were never meant to be parents, but they're also people. Sometimes people like them exist. As for my mother, she completely turned her back on me and said that I was a TV villain for not giving my father the money he deserved for raising me and my siblings. I told her he was never emotionally present as a father, and neither was she. Not just from the suicide threats, but also by being a threat to our well-being. She used to treat me as a friend and therapist, but rarely as a daughter. She used me to complain about the emotional and mental abuse my dad inflicted on her. But at the same time, she was also the person to turn her back on me in a blink of an eye, if it meant protecting my father's feelings and making him happy. Sometimes she went as far as to attack me or my siblings if we did anything to make him crossed. I guess I still have a lot of pity for her, considering that she is an illegal immigrant in an abusive situation, but it doesn't outweigh the damage. It was impossible to communicate with her since he was her own little world. I don't think she really loved me or saw me as a person or a child, just an outlet for her emotional dysfunction. Recently, my mother called me and lied about my dad being ill so they could rake a couple of bucks from me again. I told them to find their own source of money and hung up. I check up on my little brothers every now and then. They're currently still living in the hotel. While their physical safety isn't harmed, I still struggle with the guilt of leaving them behind, and I'm unclear on what the future holds for them. This past year, I learned what it meant to be independent, not just financially, but to be free from the mental control of them and making those decisions for myself. Needless to say, I'm happier. I'm surrounded with good and caring people. My grades aren't great, but better, and I'm finally in a good place right now. In the end, everything's going to be all right. And even if it's not the end.